You're listening to episode number 32 of the Happy Choir podcast. Woohoo! Hola, people. I am Carlos Cordero, host and creator of the Happy Choir podcast, helping you connect with others to choral music. In this episode, I am very excited because we have with us American composer, arranger, and singer-songwriter Amy Gordon. Amy and I connected through choral music, and I have to say that choral music keeps making it right to bring awesome people to my life. This interview with Amy is a living proof. We discussed songwriting and how it relates to choral music and choral writing. And believe me, this is one subject I love because when it comes to writing music, I am not your usual composer, and I am learning to love that about myself and my music. And thanks to this interview with Amy, I love it even more. I also say love instead of love. I don't know. There's something about the way that I say it that apparently it's different, but my ear cannot pick it up yet. But I digress. But oh, that's actually a word that I learned in podcast. So I'm getting smarter. Yay. But let's get back. Amy talks to us about her experience writing music and its relationship to songwriting, and not only that, but also teaching songwriting. Get ready for this because it's an awesome one. And before we get there, I just want to remind you quickly the ways that you can help us here. You can leave a review in iTunes, you can share this episode and all of the other ones with everybody in the world, and also you can go to patreon.com/composercordero, where for the tiny but mighty amount of $3 you can help us a lot. Now let's get to this episode with Amy Gordon. And in today's episode of the Happy Choir podcast, we have with us Amy Gordon. Hi, Amy.
Hello, Carlos.
Thank you so much for being here. It's so exciting to have this subject of today of songwriting and choral music that you bring to us.
Great. I'm so excited to be on this podcast.
I always like to start this interview from the beginning, and it's always interesting how our activities during time connect us with what we are doing today. So I want to learn more about what's your story with choral music, how you got into being a composer.
So I kind of got started writing songs actually when I was about 10. I think I got in a fight with some friends in middle school or so. I don't know, some middle school stuff. And then came home and wrote a song about it. And something kind of clicked where this became suddenly like something maybe I was doing in my piano lessons and to something that I could use as a tool to express myself. And I just kind of fell in love with songwriting after that. And I would kind of lock myself in my childhood bedroom for just hours on end. I think I even put like a sign up like saying recording, do not bother. And my parents were very aware that when I was recording something to not like knock or, tell me that it was dinner time. I think by the time I was 12, I had like cleared out my closet to make like a really old school studio, had like a 4-track tape recorder and like a floppy disk, like a keyboard that had floppy disk technology, which at the time was like really mind blowing. Now it's like, my younger students don't even know what a floppy disk is. But yeah, so at around 12 and 13, I really like got pretty serious about it and really continued writing songs and actually kind of lucked into like the whole technology world too. Like I was right on the cusp of when it was like I was like well, maybe a year behind of like I wanted to record on like a digital audio workstation, but the computers were not there yet. So I remember going to the store and it wasn't cheap enough. And the technology was not there to transfer sounds from my piano or my keyboard to the computer. So I think by the time I started school, like I had kind of gotten in at the ground level. And so I don't know, I've been very comfortable with technology and with kind of traditional notation. And yeah, and then I kind of decided to go to Loyola Marymount University for music composition and decided to really take it very seriously. And then finished my graduate studies at Cal State Long Beach. And yeah, I've been really lucky to be a composer and active choral composer and songwriter. And so that's kind of how I got my start.
That's awesome. And it's so incredible to know that it all started with a fight with your friends.
Yeah.
Things in life that happen to us, we never know where they're going to take us, right? And I love that you embraced this process.
Absolutely. Yeah, like I think some of like, our hobbies and stuff probably began out of some unexpected situations.
And I can relate so much to this because I also had in Venezuela and in here in my little closet. But in back in Venezuela, I also started with songwriting, and I did, found a microphone and learned how to use the software and all of that. And it's interesting how we got into music or we got into this activity because we wanted to express something, because we wanted to learn more about how can we create something, and not just saying I'm a composer or at least for me that came later. First I messed up with all of this software and music, and then I learned I can be a composer. Is that a thing?
Yeah, I had the same thing. Like I didn't even know that what I was doing was like a job or could be a
Yeah.
job. And it was finally like, like right before I had to pick a major that I was like, maybe this isn't just like a hobby. Maybe this is like something I have to do. And like and just once that thought kind of came, it was just like never really not no other career really made sense from that point on. But I have to ask, what software were you using when you were a kid? Like,
Back then, oh, that's a good question. I think one of them was Adobe Audition.
okay.
I think it was one of the first ones. I cannot remember the other ones, but I know that I tried several ones, including just like recording in my Walkman, and then yeah, it goes all that back,
Oh yeah,
and then playing along and then singing along. It's awesome to remember all these things
definitely, definitely.
because you see the playful part also of this career that it's not, "Oh, I'm gonna sing in the piano and I'm going to write all of this note perfectly, but I'm going to just explore."
Yeah, and in some ways those were like the most magical years of my life. Not to say that it's not now, but like just those years of just pure creation. Like there was just something so beautiful about that in many ways. A lot of what I try to do now is like try to find that same state,
Hmm.
which is obviously harder when you have, like we were talking about, pets, and they're insane and they take a lot of
Yeah.
attention and jobs and everything, and it can be harder to just kind of get into that mindset. But I think especially now we have lots of time. um, you know, maybe something that I'm working on is trying to find that state of just pure unbridled joy in composing, whether or not there's a project that comes out of it or whether or not it will ever get performed. Just that process, kind of falling in love like I did when I was younger.
That's beautiful, and I feel also the same because there is a pure kind of quality of those years of those recordings, even if they weren't probably the best quality or the best music that I've made or that we've made. Um, but there is something there that the exploration and the let me think of the word ingenuity, is that the word that I want to use?
Or just pure creativity, like
So it's interesting to realize that in that freedom of not knowing what you were doing, uh, well, we say in Spanish you, but you mean I mean one. uh, in not knowing what one was doing, then we were composers. We were trying to figure out what we wanted to say. Did you have a role model for this? Was this something that just born out of you?
well, I have to. I'm sure my parents will listen to this podcast, so I have to give them a shout out. Both my parents are incredibly supportive. My dad actually majored in classical guitar. He's a programmer now, but he's always like fostered both my parents. But my dad has always fostered a love of like, composers like Debussy and actually a lot of choral music. But I remember when I was 12. I don't know if you had the same experience, but like I was obsessed with music theory. Like ever since I can remember, I have loved it. I just vividly remember being at my like state of the art floppy disk MIDI keyboard, begging my dad to teach me Roman numeral theory. And even at that age, going, oh, what about if I do a 4-6-1-5 chord progression? I remember writing songs when I was like 13 where I've already used the 6-4-1-5 progression. Let me try the 1-5-6-4. I was already kind of thinking along those lines. So for me, I think it was having parents that were really supportive and also kind of teaching me those building blocks
Hmm.
at that young age. So yeah, I don't know if you had kind of a similar experience where like
That's awesome.
um, you were obsessed with music theory too, but
I love that you had a supportive, you were surrounded by so much support because that's so important to foster and to try to start believing in what you're doing. As we develop something in that age, we might feel we don't know what we're doing, and we don't know if we have to we can continue doing it. But the fact that you have this, not only this music surrounding, I guess is what I want to say, but that you were so eager to learn all of this, I love, because it feels so natural then that you went to composition.
Yeah, yeah.
For me, actually, my parents are not musician, but they were so supportive of me, that they will help me with my classes. I started in keyboard, then went a little bit to organ. I did a little bit of cuatro, which is a string instrument in Venezuela, kind of an ukulele. I did a little bit of guitar. I was trying,
Wow.
to explore these different instruments and how can I use them. For me, it was always the voice, more than the theory, actually.
Which is totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I love how you also mentioned that you wanted to use the 651, and then I can use this, and I already use this. So I wanted to include this other theory in my music, because then it shows too the different approaches that we have to music. I love that so much. Do you feel that this was because of the way that you were learning the music, or was part of your exploration too?
Um, I think that a lot of it again had to do with with having a very supportive household. And I mean, I don't know if I was the most outstanding piano student. I didn't practice very much. I would kind of not practice what I was supposed to and then write, like I'm sure a lot of us composers. So I think I've always been a very like self-driven,
Hmm.
creative. When I really, really get into something, like you have to like remind me to eat and remind me that I have to
Yeah.
like leave my room. But yeah, I think it was a mixture of just kind of having that background, that supportive background, and also just kind of a natural when I love something and when I get into something, I just like fully like I just go 100,000% into it. um I think that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome, and identify so much with that, because I also feel that when I see something and I want to learn every corner of it, I feel sometimes it's like, oh, is this excessive? But I like the process of learning. So just want to quickly remind you that all of the links that are mentioned in this episode will be in the show notes in thehappychoir.com/podcast, or find it in the description of this episode. Also, once you are there in the website, you can subscribe to the newsletter. This will come with a $20 discount for your next choral recording, a free guide that I've created just for you on the things that I've discovered in my career on how to be a happy composer, conductor, or singer. You will also receive a weekly email with podcast episodes, blog posts, and music. I hope to see you there. Now, let's get back to this episode. Now, going to choir, when was the time that you then related this composer side? You realize you can be a composer, that you have been writing these songs. Then, how do you get into choral music? What was the thing that drive you there?
Well, I think that as a songwriter, like I was singing throughout high school, and I mean, I was always like in choirs. I would sing at church. I was in choir in high school, and then I just happened to luck into Loyola Marymount University and Cal
Mm-hmm.
State Long Beach in Southern California. I don't know if probably been to LA, but they're both pretty close to LAX. LMU is right by LAX, and they just have fantastic choral programs. It was Dr. Mary Braden. She retired last year, but it's now Dr. TJ Harper, and Cal State Long Beach is Dr. Jonathan Tallberg. And I didn't really realize at the time at LMU that I was picking it because it was pretty local to my my childhood home, and I didn't want to leave the state, but they have just an world class choral institution there, and so I think I was just around it, and I kept kind of just always dabbling in choir, and then I think my graduate recital I had two choral pieces because I wanted to kind of have some representation
Mm-hmm.
of that side of myself on the recital. And then it was really after I graduated Cal State Long Beach, I think in 2013, that um, I kind of just lucked, I don't know, lucked or kind of just was in the right sphere of the choral world in Los Angeles. It was just this really special place, and I was really lucky to get a composer in residency kind of pretty soon after graduating, and then I was just kind of got hooked, on having the whole like live people sing your music, and just working with singers and conductors. Yeah, and it just kind of really took off from there.
It also feels like an expansion. Then you are the singer, you're writing your pieces, but then you are giving the voice to those singers in other choirs. I don't know. I'm sometimes very poetic, but I like to see those relationships and connections in choral music.
Absolutely, yeah. I kind of think of myself as like a composer, performer, educator. It's like
Hmm.
this, like a tripod, and those three parts of myself are all so closely linked that it's hard to like separate them.
It's hard, right, to just think as a composer or just think as a singer, because then when you combine them, as you said, this tripod, you make something stronger and you have something broader that you can show. That was a fun word to say. Broader.
Absolutely.
When you then realize that you can write for choir, do you feel did you feel confident that you can merge songwriting with choral music? Was that something that you see that people were doing? What happened there?
Huh, that's a really good question. I don't know if I like consciously thought like I know I'm gonna like merge songwriting and choral writing. I think that the things that that made me fall in love with songwriting are the melody. I don't know about you, but I as a composer, I still love melody. Like I still love just a
Yes,
good diatonic melody. Like I'm such a sucker for like even like just the
that's me.
four chord. Love the four chord. Like I don't know, there's just certain things from songwriting that I love, the lyric writing, the personal storytelling, and just the melody. You know, right now I'm just letting myself write the most tonal song, just to let myself do it. And I think that choral music in particular has text. Text is one of the most important things
Hmm.
when you're doing a choral piece. If unless it's like a vocalese or some sort of like syllable exploration or something, and melody. I think that it's so important that each of your parts should be singable. And when choirs seem to have enjoyed my pieces the most, it's when I've made sure that everyone gets something melodic. The altos don't just get like 5 million D and C sharps in a row.
Yes.
As an alto, I try to give us some love. But yeah, I think it's the melody, storytelling, and text that I really like in both. Um, and I guess that's maybe another reason I've been really drawn. Like choral music, especially as an art. Like I like aleatory for sure, and I like avant-garde stuff, but I do love melody, and I feel like choral music is a genre right now that really still embraces melody. Not to say that others don't, but
I understand. Yeah.
yeah.
And I have to agree completely with what you're saying, because I feel also passionate about this subject of, if you want to do a, I call it a song. I'm writing a song for choir or something like that. At first it felt for me, and that's why I asked the question, because at first I felt, oh, I cannot do this because the music that I hear out there is not all like that. You know,
Hmm.
and it feels that I don't know. It will feel like I will be too pop. Let's just say something like that, right? I will be too pop to the things that I'm hearing out there. But on the other hand, that's first, well, that's where we grew up and what we grew up listening to. Number one, and number two, there's nothing wrong with it. You can create beautiful and wonderful pieces that are impactful, that are um, beautiful art with it. So I really share your love for melody, your, as you say, the if we use four chords, if we use one chord, I always say that everything that I do in my life, it somehow goes into arbo part. I don't know if I'm cooking, if I'm singing, if I always think what arbo part will, will do. And that he I felt that when I found his music, uh I suddenly felt the permission to do more of what I wanted, because
I love that. He's one of my favorite composers.
and I definitely can hear in your music how you say that you are protecting, the melody, because somehow we can sometimes feel that we have to do something weird in order to fit in. Like, oh, this feels too, I don't know. normal.
Definitely.
Let me modulate here and let me do all these crazy things just to try to fit in something that expected. But there is something perfect in this that we're talking of protecting and showing the piece as it is. As it's, if it is tonal, it's tonal.
Yeah, so like I like tonality, but I think now that I've learned more theory, I like, but I don't know if this is like in a term, but like hypertonality, like Jacob Collier, like I love his
Oh,
work, like
uh huh.
where like you can use mostly chords from the major scale or whatever, but then having the freedom to like turn like a alley, like turn in an alleyway and go somewhere you never would have expected in like a pop song. Like I feel like I love that ability to like, ooh, if I take this chord and just move the sopranos up a half step and move the tenors down, all of a sudden I'm in like a new key. And it didn't feel that weird getting there, but it sounds really like, I don't know, it sounds different. And that's, I think, where my soul has kind of started to land as a composer, like very much, in the WC
Hmm.
like camp, like
Do you feel that this is the path for you to find your voice? What you want to, the way that you want to write music?
I don't know. I guess oh that's such a good question. I don't really know. I think I'm constantly like searching for my voice and I mean, I'm not sure that I know what it is 100% yet.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I know that I love melody and I do love tonal harmony, but I also love like chordal sonorities and quintal
Hmm.
sonorities. Yeah, definitely things more on the tonal side, but maybe not functional, if
Yeah,
that makes sense.
yeah. I also have to say that I love that you think of every singer and what they are going to sing because that's just makes the process so much beautiful and so much enjoyable as a singer. You know, when you get a part that you don't necessarily enjoy because you don't feel that you're, how do you say that? You're not singing something that makes much sense, that you're just supporting a lot of things. It kind of feels, it lets you down in some ways. But
Yeah, like
when you get a piece that, you actually have something that it's well thought out and well put into to singing, it makes so much more of an experience.
yeah, like even if it's just like one little moment, it's like as an alto, if I can just have one little tiny solo or
Yeah.
feature, that's I'll take it.
Plus, I love altos, so they are. I always say that they are one of my favorite voices to write for because it's just so amazing. And I don't know if it happens to you, and I'm sure that a lot of people will like say no, but for most of the part, altos are the coolest part section of the choirs.
Thank you. I'll take as an alto, I'll take
Yay,
it.
altos!
Yay.
Do you feel then as a composer that you have to advocate for the songwriting um, technique? I guess that we can say, is that something that you find yourself constantly talking about to conductors, or that they just embrace?
Hmm. That's a really good question. I don't think I've completely like combined those two sides of myself yet. But it's in weird ways has happened. I think I teach for a contemporary music school, called Musicians Institute, and I teach lyric writing classes and songwriting, and so, and a lot of my students there are songwriters, and so I feel like I'm constantly like thinking about that world,
Hmm.
and it's definitely on the forefront of my mind. So things like text setting, metaphor, simile, like those storytelling devices are constantly on my mind because I'm teaching them. So I think, even if I'm not writing a song per se that particular day, like if I've lectured on it, like it's somehow making its way into my choral work, and vice versa. Like if I'm working on a choral piece and I'm lecturing on some song, I'll talk about that in my class. Like so I think that the two are very, they're like circling around each other. Um but I think, I'm kind of interested in like the choral pop song
Hmm.
as a potential genre. I'm not sure quite what that looks like, but maybe not just like a pop song that's rearranged for choir, and not maybe like a choral song that's been kind of like adapted for just acoustic guitar and solo, but like some sort of hybrid where, um I don't know, like I just saw the King Singers virtual choir video of And So It Goes. Did you
Hmm.
see that?
I haven't seen it.
Oh my gosh, like literally I was just on my bed sobbing. Like
Oh, I'm
I
going
think
after this.
It's a Billy Joel song, but they just it's a choral arrangement and it I don't know, like whatever that was. Like I just my
More
soul
of
was
that.
like yes. So I mean, I know it was a pop song arrangement, but there's something about that language and the words were just so personal.
Hmm.
And I think that that's something I would like to maybe explore is just writing more like personal text. A lot of like I
Yes.
love choral text, but a lot of them are very flowery, and like very like so polished. I'm kind of interested in maybe writing something that's more like a little bit more rough around the edges, if that
Hmm.
means
Hmm.
not rough around the edges, but more like almost like this was from my diary, like
Yes.
but for choir, but starting off writing it as a choral piece rather than a pop song.
Hmm. That's
And
beautiful.
I'm not quite sure what that would look like yet, but that's definitely something, and especially now that, I'm at home a lot, that is something that, I feel like I could easily do.
And it feels too that it is something that we need in choral music because, as you say, we have a lot of these other very refined, very texts, a sort of text, but we also need this other kind of more human, more. It's not, well, I don't know if it's human, the word I want to use, but there's a different emotion and different approach of the type of text that you're talking about. And I love that idea of just having something that it's more raw, more personal. Like if we're close and you're telling me a story, yeah, I'm really, really enjoying this idea of creating a choral piece. And as you say, from the start, it is a choral piece and it is envisioned as a choral piece that uses, which is actually what I was going to say, that being a songwriter and, as you say, lecturing about it gets you new tools to explore and to communicate. So if you start doing this choral music, but with all of that you've learned from songwriting, I feel there's going to be something there that it's powerful to connect to, because something that I know they do well in songwriting is connecting with people.
Absolutely. And that's, yeah, I was just lecturing on that is that, storytelling is one of the primary functions of
Yes.
lyrics and that the story is so important. And I think what I like about songwriting is that it's okay to just write a song about, I'm having a bad day. Like,
Yeah.
because this happened and that happened, and I don't know, it's just it's a little bit more freeing. Well, I love the choral text as well. Yeah, I'm just right now, especially. I don't know how you're feeling, but I definitely feel like my emotions are very strong, and
Yep.
like I want to write something that's like something I'm actually feeling, and the story, the message behind the lyrics to me is like more important than ever. Um, yeah, so
And
yeah,
as an audience too, we need those songs there too, because as you say, we're having these feelings, and we're having, this can easily become a critic, but it's not a critic. It's just another standpoint of view, because you go to a concert having these feelings, and then let's say you find a sacred text, or you find a poem that has been used, 10,000 times, but when you find something like this, like you're saying, maybe you write lyrics about the feelings of being home and dealing with all of this, and that turns into a choral piece, you're going to connect with it. And I feel that as long as we're connecting with the art and with the music and with the performance of the choir, I feel that we've made our work.
exactly. Yeah, wherever that connection comes from.
Yeah.
And also another thing too that is a little bit different, I think, in the songwriter world and the choral composer, and you're a composer as well, um, is that the idea of poet and composer is so separate oftentimes in the choral world. It's like, well, what text are you setting? When you get a
Mm-hmm.
commission, the first thing people probably ask you is like, what text are you setting, right? Or when you approach a commissioning body, well, what text do you want me to set? And I think in the songwriting world, like most of the time, the songwriter is the lyricist. So there's, I think, there's kind of this interesting separation between text and composer in the choral world, and then the kind of wholeness of text and composer is like, of course, yeah, the singer is singing their own words in the songwriting world. And so another thing I'm interested in is kind of combining those two, where I can't think of a lot of examples of composers writing their own texts. Have you ever tried writing your own text to set?
Yeah, so lately, most of the pieces that I've done actually are my texts. I feel that there is something different to explore there, and I enjoy really. The first thing that I have in my mind is that I don't know much of what I'm doing, so that also gives me some freedom writing the text, and it's kind
Talking
of
about that, like, about that joy that we experience when we're
yeah,
younger, like, in many ways, doing something that you don't feel like 100% confident about, like, I don't know all the mechanics of poetry, it's kind of freeing because it's like, well, I'm just gonna write what I want.
yeah,
So, I don't have to worry about text, like poem or like rhyme schemes or like, I don't know. I'm just gonna write this word because I like it.
exactly. And I also love that freedom that, as you said, because there's of course great experiences with working with other poets and other people writing text, but also when you write your own text, you have a special connection with it, a different experience with yourself, and there's something that I love a lot: the freedom of knowing that you don't have to, but you can do it. The same way, the other way. If you're a writer of words and you want to write the music for it, then you can do it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, not to say that I don't love working with text. I mean, I've had the
Ex-
pleasure of working with like wonderful, wonderful poets. A lot of the texts actually I write are written by a few family members who, after
I
they
saw
passed,
that.
I actually, yeah, my aunt, my dad's sister, Susan Jordan, like I discovered a book of poetry by her. I've set, I think, 7 of her texts, and I just love them. And then my grandmother, actually, my dad's mom, he gave me a book of her poetry, just like on typewriter, like really
How
like
awesome.
probably 40 years old, but they're beautiful, and they've really lent themselves really well to choral writing. But at the same time, like sometimes I just want to try something myself. Like maybe I have something I want to look at, but there's no text out there that I can find that says exactly what I want it to say. So
And I have to say that at first, when I started in choral music, that was not what I saw out there. So that's also why I asked you the question of songwriting related to choral music when you were starting, because I felt, okay, I'm gonna be a choral composer. I cannot do this. I have to leave this behind because that's not what I'm seeing there. I'm seeing, all this Latin text or Saratiel's text, which I love all of that, but also it's incredible for me to now realize that more and more people are opening their writing to all of these options.
yeah, absolutely. I think it just I see the same thing happening where like we're inviting more parts of our creative selves into the process, and I think that's really, really cool.
Maybe you create the piece from beginning to end with the choir or with a community or with students. You bring this songwriting process from the beginning, not just we already have the text, not let's come up with what's the story, what's the storytelling. Is it like a workshop? Yeah, with from beginning to end, from text to music.
Like yeah, I would definitely be interested in something like that where like the entire process is a collaboration, and like you're coming up with a story with the people that will be singing it. Like I think I hope I'm answering your question, but one of like the most rewarding texts I've written was on this piece called Lotus Flower by it was commissioned by Ruth Ballinger, a high school in Southern California, and she asked me to select a text from this like book of poems written by then seniors, and I actually picked a text by this beautiful poem by this graduating senior, Annalise Venegas, and and she was able to actually read it at the premiere, and she was in the same school as like the choir, and so it was just like this really cool um experience. There was something extra musical about that premiere because it was of the community. Like I was honestly like the least important part. It was just like it was the singers singing the text of their friend as part of their culminating concert, and that. So I think that answers your question. But yes, absolutely.
It makes it so special then because And as you say, we become in that part like the connector that puts all of the pieces together. But I feel that all of these little details makes the experience of writing the piece, of hearing the piece, of knowing that you created something that connects more than just I'm here, I set this text to music, I'm done. But it's actually
Exactly.
it becomes something else that I don't know, I love even more.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the choral community, like the community is so important.
Hey people, I want to take a quick second to tell you how your support makes a difference. When you support me on patreon.com, you are not only giving $3 a month, but you are giving my brand a vote of confidence. This translates to helping several other artists to connect through choral music. Think about it as a cup of coffee that you invite me once a month, only that it's way more impactful and personal. Plus, you get to be part of the behind the scenes of my career as a composer, with the many perks that I shared in there. Even if you're not able to give right now, your support listening to this podcast is great, even more if you leave a review in iTunes. Patreon.com/composercordero is the link that you want to visit or share with others. Hope to see you there. For somebody who's on songwriting, for example, and it's thinking of writing a choral piece, what was your process then to understand how these two related? What's a step that you will recommend somebody take?
So I think you do need to understand what I often talk about in my theory classes is as a songwriter, you're thinking a lot about horizontal line. You're thinking about melody. Maybe you do some backing harmonies, but for the most part, it's still just like probably just note for note with the lead. Um, and you kind of do have to transition both horizontal line like melodic to vertical four part or three part. You do have to become comfortable of the stack of chords interacting with each horizontal line. Not quite polyphonic necessarily, but I do think that that's a leap that many singers kind of maybe have to again, like for all the talk of like kind of modern music, I think going back to like the Bach chorales,
Mm-hmm.
like if you can sing through each of his parts, you'll see that they're each very melodic. So, but the horizontal, the vertical also makes a lot of sense. So I think if you're a songwriter looking to go into choral music, I would spend some time wood shopping your four part writing because you do have to at some point understand the vertical plus the horizontal, and unless you have control of that vertical, the voice, just basic voicing rules, you're probably going to run into trouble. You might be able to do the soprano line fine, maybe the bass line, but then when you're trying to fill in the parts, you might be getting some weird, like, well, if you don't exactly know like what chords you're trying to go for or who has doubled what tone, I think you might run into some kind of weird situations or some weird unbalanced voicing. So I think that there probably is just a little bit of just, keyboard four part practice singing through kind of the canon of Bach chorales that would really inform your control of that vertical plus horizontal.
I love that, and it's funny that I'm such a visual person. Oh my god, I cannot speak English today. But visual person because as you said that I could imagine, moving the parts. Oh, I want to do this up, this here, this around, and I don't know why I remember there's a game, iPhone app called Unblock Me, and you
I
move.
love that game.
Oh my god, I'm obsessed with that
Yeah.
game. And you move one part, and then it makes sense horizontally, but maybe you block something vertically. I don't know.
Is it okay? I want to steal that for my classes. That's a
Yes.
beautiful, beautiful picture.
And as you
Yes.
said, maybe you're thinking horizontally, and oh, this makes total sense. And then when you go vertically, you move something that completely changed the whole thing that you were building before. So then you go and maybe you think vertically, and yes, now it's done, but then horizontally doesn't make sense. So that's why it reminded me of the game because it's like a combination of okay, if I move this, I still have to make sure that it makes sense both ways, and it can be compromising sometimes. You have to compromise sometimes. But I love how you say that to be aware of these two planes because it's easy to concentrate on, oh, how are the chords working, and then you get these beautiful melodies of and just feeling
Yeah,
the words.
exactly. Yeah, so I think that's really when I analyze Bach, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, his vertical plus horizontal always
It's
works.
amazing.
Yeah, the chords are amazing, the melodies are amazing, and the true magic is when they come together. And so that's something I have to constantly be like kind of not letting myself be lazy about is making sure that the horizontal works. The best piece of advice I got, I forget who said this, but is if you can't sing through your part correctly after 3 times, you need to rewrite it.
I
So
love that.
I have lived by that advice. If I can't sing any of the parts, if there's a spot I keep messing up on as a composer, like if I'm composing it and I still can't sing it, like how is my singer going to be able to sing it? Like so I do need to change something.
I love that because I've always said the same thing, but I've never added the 3 time thing. So it will be like, oh yeah, I got this at the 10 time. It's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, if you can't after like 5 times, there's
Maybe
something wrong.
exactly.
Yeah, and it's usually like something I know that I need to change. I'm just being lazy. Like, do I really need to change this? If I have to change this, that means I have to redo this whole page. But it is definitely worth that extra time. Like,
I love
I've
it.
never regretted spending that extra hour fixing something. I've always regretted ignoring that voice and then going to rehearsal and being
Yes,
like, darn it,
I should have changed
that's
that.
where they messed up.
I-
Exactly.
There is something, yeah. When I'm making a piece, there is something that I keep like, should I change that? No, should I change that? And I always come back to that. And I have to learn that. Yes, that's the alarm to say yes, change it.
Exactly. Yeah.
For the lyric part, I have a friend actually that he will love this episode because he's also interested in writing his own text to send to music. And for that lyric part, what would be your recommendations of?
Yeah, yeah. No, that's a great question. Yeah, I mean, I feel like the biggest thing for songwriting is just getting your critic out of the creative process. Like when you sit down, and this is so much easier said than done, right?
Yes,
But like so many times, like I'll pick up a pencil and like before I've even started writing, like the voices have already started. Like, why are you even bothering when like Beethoven exists, or like when insert famous poet. And then it's like, okay, what's the point? But then I have to gently like put that aside. And Dale Trambore's book, Staying Composed, is great.
it's amazing.
She's also a English major as well, and she writes some of her own texts. She started writing more and more of her own texts as well. And I think that a lot of what she talks about too is just like letting yourself compose. And actually, Deke Sharon's acapella arranging book, I think it's just called acapella arranging. He has a whole chapter on like these 3 parts of our creative process: the dreamer, the critic, and the editor. And he talks about how the dreamer is really responsible for that content creation, and the critic and the editor really have to leave the room during that precious content creation. This is something I teach in my first week of lyric writing, is allowing yourself to just be inspired. Don't critique anything yet. They will come in later. But when you're in that dream state, just pick up your pencil and just write. And then you can come back to it and say, maybe this line is too long. Maybe this line isn't as strong as I thought. But I think the biggest thing is just let yourself write. I know that's easier said than done.
No, but I love that idea because, well, first of all, we cannot stop saying that because we have to learn how to do that, and it always takes a lot of work, as you say. It's easier said than done. But as more as we repeat it, we constantly remind ourselves, yes, I need to be gentle to myself. I need to allow myself to have space to create because a lot of things we're going to invite that critic over our room and say, yeah, that's terrible, but because that's our inner critic self-defense of, is this going to be good, is this going to work? It's easier to say that this doesn't work, that this might be something that it's worth listening to. It's scary, to let yourself create, but I feel that, as you say, as long as we keep letting ourselves create more and not just critiquing, not just trying to make something good, but just make, then we will unlock something.
Yeah, I love that too. And I think it's so interesting. We're both composers. We're both so, we're so like invested in getting that piece performed, or who's going to like this piece. I think as composers, we're so drilled into the product,
Hmm.
the like how good is this going to be. And I think for me, like, I had this realization that sometimes it's just about the process. Like, it's okay if this isn't going to be good. Like, just the process, maybe separating the end result from the process. Like, questions like, will this be good, will that, that can also like add a lot of stress. And if you just kind of, I know this is, again, so much easier said than done, but like, I'm just going to write, and I'm not going to care what it turns out. Just the process of writing and letting yourself not even worry if this ever sees the light of day. Like, maybe this will be the worst thing I've ever written, but when I'm creating it, I'm not even thinking about that.
And what's beautiful too, at least for me, is that knowing, because we all have these feelings, but we don't necessarily share them. And I love that you're opening to us here, because as a fellow creative, I know I feel those things too. And if I see more of that out there, I feel okay. That happens. It's easy to just see finished product and see the concerts and think, okay, everybody's doing well, and I'm doing this terrible piece.
Yeah, exactly. Or social media, you see
Exactly.
everyone's curated. Why doesn't my lunch look that beautiful? My scrambled eggs look so lame in comparison to
Thank you for bringing the food example of the day, but I love it.
exactly.
Yeah, because it's so easy to, oh yeah, I hit double bar today. I'm like, oh, I'm in the third bar, and I think that the first one doesn't
Yeah,
work, and the second one I'm going to erase.
yeah, exactly. So sometimes it's kind of fun. Like, I try and, like, maybe what if I make a social media post that's like, maybe I'm having trouble today, like, finishing a piece, or like, I'm always really appreciative of artists who like make posts that are like letting us behind the scenes and
Hmm.
like, yeah,
Yes,
I really struggled with this, or here was a piece that I wrote that never got performed, and like, I don't know,
it helps.
it's kind of
It's kind of,
comforting.
we're on the same boat, and I got you, kind of, kind of thing. The And thinking of that myself for my career, for example, right now with all of the COVID roller coaster thing, I haven't been able to write much, and I feel that as much as I that stresses me, I'm also letting myself, because I don't want, I'm letting myself breathe and has the space to then come back to it. Normally, I will say you have to see that and you have to do. You cannot wait to to want to write it. But I feel that right now, because of the size of this uh, uncertainty, that it will affect negatively the piece, right? Because I will make myself compose something that I'm probably not ready to say yet. And I feel that happens a lot with writing, that we might want to do something, but not exactly be sure. I don't know if that makes sense, so I probably will edit it out.
Yeah, totally. And I'm so glad you said that too, because when this all started, like, I was like, oh, I've been wanting to write this huge orchestral piece, and I got my orchestral template set up, and I was going to write something really frenetic and scary, and like name it like Quarantine or something, and something like, but I found that it was just too much. I think I'm so happy, like, I'm not happy to hear that you're feeling that way too, but like, I think I've been seeing a lot of similar sentiments among composers. Like, it's really hard to compose right now.
Yeah,
You would think that with extra time, but in many ways, like, our emotional bandwidth is just so, there's so many other things taking up our emotional bandwidth that it actually is like harder to compose in many ways. And it's kind of freeing to hear other artists say, you know what, like I can't, it's okay that I'm not composing right now, because then you're like putting extra pressure on yourself. An extra problem is like, I'm not composing anything right
yeah.
now, then. But what I found is I had to step away from the orchestral piece for a while. Also, my orchestration was a little rusty. I was like, I've been reading my orchestration book and like doing some
I love
score
it.
study. I found that smaller things have been easier. So actually, one thing to kind of, talk about my songwriting,
Hmm.
I've actually been finding arranging works that I've written for maybe essay or solo for SATB has been much more kind of emotionally available to me
Hmm.
than starting a new piece or doing something big. So I actually wrote this song when I was 17 called In the Morning. And it's kind of like it's all about finding hope in the midst of struggle. And I actually arranged it for a mezzo soprano and tenor for my undergrad recital at LMU in like 2007, 2008. And this text has been like gnawing at me. And it started off as a pop song, kind of like a musical theater pop song when I was 17. And I wrote it before college, but so I really was just doing what I wanted to do. And now I just finished an SATB arrangement of it. And it had been tugging at me to like arrange me for choir, arrange me for choir. And so I found it much easier to work in a space where I didn't have to make so many creative decisions. I've actually started maybe writing some of my own texts. We'll see. But I'm finding that the less gargantuan the task, the more I can kind of easily slide into it. So I'm being very, very calm very gentle with myself right now, and only writing the things that I feel I have the energy to write.
Yeah, I feel that right now we have that permission. I feel that, it's okay not to write music. It's okay because a lot of people will think you have more time at home. That's great. That you're a composer, you work from home, do it. And you are like, as you said, I think that the emotional bandwidth was a perfect way to put it because all of those emotions plus writing music is already a roller coaster of emotions. It's I can see the relationship there of why we don't feel at our best to write music because we are dealing with all of this
Yeah.
situation.
And especially, for those who have children and they're
Oh
all at
my god, the
home and like,
heroes. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, and we're also like, if you live with someone else, like you're always at home, so
Mm-hmm.
you don't really get that quiet time.
Yeah.
Maybe they would go to the gym for an hour and you'd get like an hour to just sit. So I'm finding too, it's just harder to like, there's no segmentation of my day too. So it's like everything is,
Yeah.
just day at home. Like, and also like if we're teaching, and a lot of us are teaching too, I mean, that alone, transferring, in-person classes to online is like a full-time, you know, like there's just so many other things that are.
Well, and as you mentioned, even more details like thinking, okay, you're teaching the whole day in the computer now, so thinking now I'm going to write this piece and I'm going to transcribe the music in the computer. You might be allergic to the to the
Oh
scream
yeah.
by then.
every yeah, every aspect of my life is now like a Zoom box.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I've been writing texts. I've been just bringing a really pretty journal someone gave me into my spare room, and maybe 2:30 in the morning when the moon is out. Like that was one of my peak creative experiences, was just, sitting in the quiet, no
Yes.
technology, just starting to write these texts. And it did kind of pour out of me, but I was really grateful to not have to do it at the computer.
Yeah, and I love that you said too the reframing of maybe you won't be able to write a new piece right now, but you can still work on things that you did. You can train yourself and revoice some things. I mean, we can stay creative without having so much work to do to or
Exactly.
pressure. I love
Yeah,
that.
and I'm trying to figure out now, like what can I do to help choir directors next year? And I think one thing that I've been hearing is just flexibility in pieces. So I might even want to go back to some of my pieces, and I've been hearing a lot of like unison,
Yeah.
adaptations. And again, kind of that brings us back to songwriting, right? If you take like a song that had 8-part divisi and you arrange it for piano and melody, guess what? That's
Hmm.
kind of now closer to a pop song. Not saying that it's not a choral piece, but it's interesting that I think these two worlds are gonna merge more
Hmm.
if we're doing a lot more, maybe not virtual choir, but like if we're doing online learning, it's harder to sing parts. So you might have more unison pieces where people can perform them at home, or you know,
Well,
if that makes sense.
and also if yeah, let's make perfect sense. And if you wrote a piece that as you said protect and care so much about the melody of the parts, then you will be grateful that now that you're doing these adaptations, you will have something to work on.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah. So, and I think, I don't know about you, but I'm also thinking about like trying like a little bit, like a Zoom based piece. And I think
That's
that
awesome.
chords plus melody might lend themselves okay to it. We'll have to see, but I think that yeah, I don't know. I think aleatory
Yeah.
is going to come back on Zoom, and yeah, I don't know. I
Forced
definitely like
aleatoric.
forced aleatory. Yes. So I definitely think that like the songwriting aspect and kind of the ingenuity required right now is getting me thinking about things. Um, but yeah, I'm not quite sure where that's going to go yet. But the songwriting part of me is really like pulling. It's just like pulling on my sleeve, going, "Don't forget me, don't forget me." Like,
That's
you
awesome.
know, I could be helpful right now, so we'll see.
And staying open and inviting every tool that you have in your box to be able to produce what you make, because to do your music, because at the end I feel that our music is the, I think the sum is what I want to say, the sum of everything that we are. And if we're also songwriters, why not? It's perfect to explore and to create our own music.
I love that. Yeah.
How can we find you online so you can share? And of course, this will all be in the show notes, but I just would like you to tell us.
Great. Yeah. You can go to my website, amygordonmusic.com, and I actually have my entire sheet music catalog available with perusal scores and recordings. That was another big project this year. So you can kind of see, hear, and listen. And you can find me on YouTube, SoundCloud, all the things, just Amy Gordon Music. And this has been so wonderful. I've been wanting to just chat with you because I love I especially love your laugh.
Oh,
So
thank
it
you so
was
much.
wonderful my goal was to get some good laughs.
That's awesome. And I also love that you took the time not only to be here in the Happy Quarter podcast, but also to bring such an important subject, because then I feel that uh, we start to be a voice for this. As we were saying, we didn't see that um, growing up as musicians, and now we're starting to see more of that, and we're adding to the people that might be thinking, is that okay? Is that they can listen to this and know, yes, you can write music, you can write text, yes, you can do you and bring that person to their music. So
Yeah. We really need everybody. We need everyone on deck right now in terms of like, processing what's going on and bringing art.
so what's the word? So inspirational. That's the word I want to use. English is hard. Never forget. Thank you so much, Amy. This was amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to this interview.
Thank you so much for having me on. I love your podcast, and I just think it's such a wonderful gift that you're bringing to the community.
You've been listening to the Happy Choir podcast. For more information and show notes, visit thehappychoir.com.